Hey everyone, I'm going to share a story about heartache, pain, psychedelic therapy, and aliens. Um, so, I'm going through a breakup right now, which is a very difficult and painful experience. It's also incredibly beautiful and one of the most teaching experiences of my life. So nothing that I regret by any means, but just something that I'm growing from and really learning a lot and loving from. And I was uh, I was down south for a number of days, sort of over the Christmas and New Year's period, and after having processing the breakup for a few days, I decided that I was going to embark on a magic mushroom ceremony with a few friends on a beautiful beach overlooking the Pacific Ocean, surrounded by mountains and a starry night sky, moonlit and magical. So we brewed a mushroom tea with a strong dose for each person. And initially, we were, as a group, there were five of us, four of my really close friends, all guys, all brothers of mine, just amazing human beings. And we drank the tea. And initially, we were chatting for, let's say an hour. And when I would close my eyes, I was having the most profound visual experiences where entities, um, tons of them, were filling my perceptual field. So I'd be sitting there with my eyes closed, and there would be some like Ursula, the evil octopus from the film The Little Mermaid. If any of you remember that, she terrified me as a child. But something that looked like resembled her, or reminded me of her, didn't necessarily physically look like her, but it was this like morphing yellowish and blackish feminine type figure with long hands, and like was um, in my vision right about here. And if I had been a child, this entity would have been absolutely terrifying. And what was interesting is that she was made up of thousands of different smaller components, every one of which was morphing and changing, and flowing in and out of one another. It was this mosaic that created sort of a larger whole. And but yeah, if I had been a child at that time, I would have been scared out of my mind. But something I've really learned to appreciate and have patience for is the darkness, and to just sit with it and not necessarily be infiltrated by it, and with no need to succumb to it, but able to observe it with the understanding that I am safe and I am protected, and that I'm not going to be harmed in a scenario such as that. So after chatting with the guys for an hour, I thought I was just going to go take a pee in the ocean. But then that little trip to the bathroom turned out to be much more than I initially bargained for. And I sat down on the beach, not too distant from the actual flowing ocean waves. And immediately I started seeing all of these patterns, these sacred geometric patterns in the waves, and they were flowing and enveloping and meshing into one another. And I was feeling this ocean energy communicate with me. Very powerful. I mean, the ocean is often symbolic of emotions and their movement. Um, Obviously, there's a connotation when it comes to tears and crying. Um, and I was feeling this invitation from the ocean energy. And as I would close my eyes, I could see all of these small entities that they look like the backgrounds of Shipibo art. If any of you are familiar with the Peruvian tapestries or paintings that the Shipibo tribes create. So these like little, they're hard to explain, but you can just Google it. And they're all morphing into one another. And there were sort of two contrasting behaviors of these entities, some of which felt deathly and decaying, and sort of like they were absorbing energy and taking that on and then dying and decaying. Whereas there was another perspective that was blossoming and flowering and sort of like a birthing and a lively process, a process of giving energy. And I think as a human, the lively, or at least myself personally, the lively, blossoming energy is more attractive. It just feels nicer, because I guess as a 29-year-old, I'm not yet ready to die. So the sort of deathly decaying modality is less desirable, although it is fascinating and intriguing. I mean, I'm not someone that thinks he wants to live immortally as a human being. If my consciousness persists after my human experience, that's pretty cool. But also not necessary, because I am fascinated by the experience of death. And I don't think that death is the end of anything, but simply an evolution onto a different form of existence, and that perhaps the death itself is a moment, like a single instance before you're birthed into some new form. So that the death could simply be a signifier of change. So anyway, there were these two sort of modalities of these conscious entities, the death versus the lively ones. And I felt the ocean sort of inviting me, saying, like, you can become one with this. Like, you can become one with the ocean waves. And I telepathically responded. I'm like, I appreciate the invitation, but I'm not ready to become fully one with the ocean yet. I want to continue out my human life for the time being. And one of the big reasons I was interested in having this mushroom tea ceremony was because I really wanted to treat it as a therapeutic, almost a grieving process for my relationship, which was absolutely wonderful, and still remain best friends with her. And But yeah, I just really wanted to acknowledge what I was going through. And it was painful, to really sit with the pain of that breakup. Was It was really powerful and really painful. And what was cool about it is that I didn't want to run away from it, like I didn't want to suppress the pain. I didn't want to not experience it. Although it was causing me great strife and agony, I wanted and desired to remain inside of it, because I wanted to process it and I wanted to experience it, as opposed to pretending like it wasn't happening. And I think that's largely what the human experience is about, and the human condition. It often has to do with pain and suffering. A concept in the show Westworld is that suffering is fundamental to consciousness. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily true, but it seems pretty near essential to the human condition. I'm not sure there are any people out there living without any semblance of pain. Perhaps it's attainable, but I certainly experience moments of pain. And yeah, so I was thinking that it would be a really interesting process to fully acknowledge the pain and the grief that I was experiencing. And there were actually moments where I was keeling over on the beach and being flattened on my back in agony due to the pain. I was experiencing it physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And it was agonizing. Like, I was moaning, lying on this beach, and then rain actually started washing over me while I laid in the sand. And I was like, ugh, like, just so much pain. Perhaps the most painful experience of my life. And I was crying and sobbing my eyes out. And yeah, super, super difficult. And so, there's many different levels to this story. So I would sit up and I would look around, and oftentimes when I use psychedelics, or pretty much all the time, I start seeing sacred geometry. So sacred geometric patterns like the flower of life, or pictorial fields, triangles, circles, all sorts of sacred geometric patterns that I've always perceived as the fabric of our universe, sort of the building blocks of physical reality. And that, in everyday waking consciousness, our prefrontal cortex likely filters that information out, filters the wonder and awe associated with perceiving that sacred geometry so that we can focus on survival as a human being. I mean, it makes sense from that perspective. But then these psychedelics oftentimes, and not that you need the psychedelics, there are other means of arriving here, but where you can perceive more of what I believe is actually happening in physical reality. Although I do think reality as a whole is largely subjective anyways. But so I'm seeing all of this sacred geometry, and it has these like electric feel to it, like these beautiful colors of like purples and pinks and greens and reds, every color you can imagine, and very beautiful. And I'm looking at all these shapes, and I started going deeper into them. Because my experience with psychedelics is that there's an infinite amount of stimuli. Whatever direction I look, there's infinite stimuli that I can become engaged with and totally enthralled with and immersed in. And so sometimes I might dive into something, very briefly, but then like something else catches my attention and then I go in that direction. But in this instance, as I was like really sitting with my pain and trying not to be distracted by anything, I decided I was going to go deep, sort of like in particular directions, let's say diving deep down single rabbit holes at a time. So I would stare at these sacred geometric patterns, and I actually realized that the repeating individual sequences of the overall larger pattern, each like individual entity was a conscious being of sorts. And in this moment, I understood them to be aliens. And since reflecting upon the experience, I actually now just refer to them as aliens to my perception, because I believe they are native to our universe, native to planet Earth. It's just that we can't perceive them in our normal waking lives. So I was looking at each of these. Entities. And I was perceiving it as this alien farm, like a system, a network of different conscious alien entities that were farming humanity. And I actually then started telepathically communicating with these alien entities and asked them, like, what is our relationship? Like the relationship between you and me, between your species and humanity. And what do you think of me? And their response was, you just are, and we just are. And that was sort of it, but then the understanding I was gathering from it is it's analogous to the way that humans interact with ants. Ants are roaming around our planet, and we don't pay much attention to them. I think ideally we hope that they live a happy, wonderful, healthy life, but it's not a primary focus of ours. We're not really doing all that much to try to enhance their existence. We can talk about environmentalism and sustainability, but I think most people would be deluding themselves if like their main focus was to ensure that ants were living a better life. There is a holistic approach to everything living a better life, of which ants are included, but to single them out would be, for me, a bit far-fetched, even though I do love the little guys. But so I was communicating with these alien entities, and they're like, yeah, the relationship is similar to the one that you have with ants. You exist, we exist. We're not consciously communicating with one another that regularly, but we're both here. And then this notion of farming, and they were explaining that, yes, like we derive energy from you humans. And similarly, you derive energy from us, this alien species. And it's a symbiosis. A symbiosis similar to the way that we exhale carbon dioxide that trees then breathe in, and then the trees exhale oxygen, which humans then breathe in. And we sustain one another. It's a symbiotic relationship. I recently saw this meme that expressed that what if plants are actually raising humans so that they can benefit from our carbon dioxide, and then they can feed off of our nutrients once we die and decay into the earth, and then that helps them grow. And similar, and vice versa, we eat plants. So it is this symbiotic relationship. I think everything in the universe is interconnected and derives energy from one another the same way that, life sustains death and death sustains life. It's this circle of existence, this circle of life. So as I was communicating with this one particular alien species, I would look in another direction and I could see a totally different alien species. And I realized that there were thousands of them that I was becoming aware of, or perhaps not thousands, I would say realistically probably 100. And I didn't have time to engage with every one of them, but I engaged temporarily with a number of them. And another really cool notion was this this one particular species that was up here when I was looking. They were talking to me about my notion of energy and humanity's notion of energy, and my notion of clean energy, for example, and energy generation. And they were explaining to me, they're like, your notion of energy is so minuscule compared to the grandiosity of what actually exists in terms of energy. You think in terms of magnetic generation or solar power or wind power or oil powered or coal powered. And they're like, regardless of the cleanest form that you use, you're essentially talking about striking a match in all of infinity. Like, that is the significance of the energy that you're referring to, because the reality of the situation is that you exist inside of universal life flow. You are part of it. This infinite flow that subsists eternally. It never ends. And it encompasses all things. And then they were showing me these little entities that I referred to earlier that exist in the fabric of everything, and some of them are flowering and breathing and giving, and then others are decaying and dying and sort of absorbing. And that's what takes place at a microcosmic level, down to the smallest microorganisms, and then going fractal into that, what makes up those microorganisms, to the largest, most macrocosmic scale, where universes are giving birth to other ones or absorbing dying universes through black holes, and more larger examples than that as well, which exist on larger scales. And it was absolutely fascinating just interacting with these other conscious beings of these different perspectives, what I would perceive as sort of larger, more expanded cosmic perspectives than what humans, or at least I, used to typically think about. And another notion I was contemplating with them was money, in conjunction with energy. And they were explaining to me, they're like, you humans you're always trying to extract something. It's like you're trying to extract resources from Earth. We're trying to extract resources so that we can sustain our lives. And they're like, you're always trying to extract, but there's nothing to extract. It's all here. It's all already existing. And it's infinite, and you exist inside of it. You are it. So I suppose my limited human perspective wants to flip the definition and say, well, it's about harnessing energy, but I think that's even still a limited viewpoint of it. So yeah, and then I would close my eyes, and it would be like a fucking kaleidoscope that was solid, like opaque, that was morphing, like the most amazing painting you've ever seen, like an Alex Grey painting, but it wasn't an Alex Grey painting as like a cover of some super psychedelic musical album, but it was like morphing and flowing into everything, and it was so viscous and opaque and solid and like vibrant colors and magical. And then when I would open my eyes, I'd see these little conscious entities, what I believe are the same entities that Terence McKenna referred to as the machine elves, who are sort of at the foundation of reality and help in sort of the mechanical um, beings that are helping our physical reality exist. Though I do think there are likely even smaller ones and that go fractal into their existence, and larger ones as well. I think we live in a quite paradoxical universe from the human perspective. And yeah, finally, I'll touch on the fact that there was I looked in my stomach as I was at this one point when I was keeled back and falling in pain, and there was this reddish, yellowish, tentacled alien entity inside of my stomach, and it was like wrapped around me, and I could feel it, and it was actually like a beautiful being. It meant no harm, and it was emblematic, or at least related to the love I share with my now former girlfriend. And it was interesting because this was a symbiotic relationship as well. It was like the love was feeding me, and I was feeding the love, and the connection between the two of us was feeding each of us, and we were feeding the connection. Again, a symbiotic relationship. And I won't go into that aspect anymore, but it was a really awesome and fascinating experience to sort of see emotions in a different form, and to understand them differently, and to really like see their beauty. And it was overall a really powerful grieving and therapeutic experience, and also a bonding experience for like myself, understanding myself even further, and really seeing the beauty in all of this, and also a really wonderful bonding experience to have the support of my brothers, and to be there for them as well, and to share in that really magical experience. And I feel like there's one more point that I really want to share that's just eluding me. It's escaping me in this moment. But hmm. uh, Another experience I had was when I was lying on the beach. I was sitting there, and it was pretty cold at night, and I was just wearing sweatpants and a sweatshirt, and it was raining, and it was kind of chilly, and it was nighttime, obviously. So I certainly could have succumbed to the cold, and my friends were joking, like, "Do you want to put a jacket on?" And I would be like, that's just a decision, and I feel like it would be so cozy. And then we sort of personified the jacket and said like, oh, she wants to wrap herself around you to provide you that comfort. And it was this sort of thought that would pop into my head while I was sitting there, really immersed in the pain of the breakup experience. And I I would think about like, oh, there's the comfort of that jacket back there, but then I realized that that comfort would probably be a distraction from what I was going through, and I would put that jacket on, and it would probably take me out of that headspace of fully acknowledging and embracing the pain. So I kept electing not to put the jacket on, and then after a few hours, I eventually did get up. I'd cried a lot of tears and communicated with a lot of aliens. And I went to the car, and I put the jacket on. And then when I put it on, I realized I was still shivering inside of it, and I was still seeking the comfort. So I recognize that warmth, for example, or comfort is an internal decision. You give that to yourself. Um, and, if you're not willing to receive warmth or to be warmth, it doesn't matter if you put a jacket on, you're still going to be shivering inside it. The jacket itself is not going to make you truly comfortable and warm. And so that warmth, I think, is metaphorical for a lot of things in our life. Like sometimes we look to external stimuli to provide us with certain things, whether it be happiness or security or comfort or love. And ultimately, I think you have to decide upon all of those things for yourself. You have to choose, I am going to be comfortable with who I am. I'm going to be secure with who I am. I am going to love myself. And then at that point, you invite additional love from other people, but there's no love that can really be taken away from you because you have your solid foundation of your own love. And I think that's similar with peace. Like you can look to the world around you and think, oh, the political landscape is tumultuous and there's war in the world and violence, which there are. But if you're waiting for that to change to feel peace, I suspect you're going to be waiting a while. Whereas if you can decide that you are peaceful and that you feel peace, well, I believe your outer world will start to reflect your inner world, and that harmony you have internally will give the external world something to harmonize with. Because I really think that the vibrations of the universe want to harmonize with one another. So, be that light and make those decisions on your own. And yeah, I'll just add the caveat that I don't necessarily think psychedelic therapy in this sense, if you're going through a difficult time, psychedelics may not be your best avenue. I'm very experienced with a lot of psychedelics. I've had countless ceremonial experiences. I treat them very much as a medicine with intentionality. And even going into this ceremony, I was nervous, and I even thought like this might be my last psychedelic experience ever because I expected it to be quite difficult, and it was, but it was also quite amazing. And so, yeah, if you're in like a really dark place, and depending on your mental state, I don't necessarily suggest the psychedelics. Now, if you're a person who is mindful and you feel you have great self-esteem and self-love and you know that you're going to be okay in any situation, then I think it's something that you can consider in difficult times. But by no means is this a method of escapism. It's actually really going in to the pain. And I just read this Rumi quote, something to the effect of, the cure to the pain is the pain. So go into it. So psychedelics can be powerful, but there's also they need to be treated with respect and caution, in my opinion. So that's all I'll share for this story. I hope some of you guys find it valuable, and I love you.